Good
And
afternoon. I've got a prayer to begin us, and this prayer is a prayer for gratitude, which I am filled with right now. It's a beautiful part of the world to live in, and I am grateful for that and grateful for all the people I'm surrounded with as I've made this transition. So let us pray. Open our eyes, Lord, that we may see all that you give so abundantly, and teach us to be grateful for the things we hold closest to our heart, for the things that all share in common, for the smallest of pleasures, and for the great hope of heaven. In all that you have given us, let us see your hand, and let our delight in your gift become an unending prayer of thanksgiving and an ever-growing habit of generosity towards others, for the sake of him who loves us and gave himself for us, even Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. So, Bishop, we'll stay with you and go to any updates you want to provide.
I just want to say that moving here has been like drinking from a fire hose. It has been a joy, and I want to thank all the diocesan staff and all the various clergy I visited. I've been in a parish every Sunday since October 1st when I came on strength of the diocese. We have our slate of archdeacons in, and we now have a new regional dean in Trish Miller. And slowly we are beginning to shape things in a way that is for the next season in the life of the church. I'm very excited that Nancy Beale has signed on for rural ministry and training. She's already doing a lot of that work as warden of lay readers, but I think our rural parishes need a place to go to ask for advice sometimes. And in Nancy's case, she's done rural ministry for many years. She's an expert in it, really. I knew her many years ago when she was in a rural ministry in the Diocese of Huron before she moved up here to the Diocese of Ontario. I'm really grateful for the staff of the Synod office here who have done amazing work in accommodating me and figuring me out and helping me figure them out. I have been working hard. I've been invited to write some reflections for various prayer resources. You will have seen that we released my Advent 4 meditation on love. And then there is also a Christmas message that I've recorded, which will be released. I believe we're going to do that Friday so that people have it, before Christmas gets going. I used to do this in my previous diocese as a written letter, and I always put it out a couple of days early in case any of the clergy had reached a dry spot in their preaching preparations, so that if nothing else, their bishop could maybe prime the pump for them a little bit. So that's what that's about. I need to especially thank Mark Hauser for working with me in producing the videos, and he has taken some official portraits. And I need to thank Alex. I cannot tell you how many times I go tiptoeing down the hallway and say, "Can I bug you for a minute?" Because there's yet another question I need to get answered, or another piece that needs sorting out. You'll hear more about the budget and the year-end stuff, which I think we're in good shape for the shape we're in. I'm excited about what is coming. I think we have a good place to set off for 2024, and let's not let the administrivia get in the way of the kingdom. The administrivia is always a means of making sure the kingdom can be brought in to birth in our midst as much as we can enjoy it in this plane of existence, before we go to that, what is it, the greater light and the further shore. So I am enjoying myself immensely. If you are sick of seeing pictures of me, blame Mark. But I'm enjoying being out in the parishes every week, meeting people, spending time in various places. I'm gonna, if I list everywhere I've been, I'll sound like Stompin' Tom. So I'm not gonna do that. And singing, I've been everywhere, man. But there you go. So thank you, Alex, and over to you. Unless people have questions for me.
Okay, well, we do have Q&A at the end as well, so that'll
Okay.
give the opportunity for anyone that that wants to speak to the bishop or ask questions later. So we're going to cover a lot of material today, and as the bishop just said, we are far more than the administrivia, far more than finance, far more than COVID. But the real gut of this meeting is the information around 2024 and the planning. And so if you're not sort of interested in matters of planning and finance, you may find this is a little less than exciting. But we're going to do a quick COVID update, a quick 2023 update from the diocesan end, the summary of the budget that was approved by council, and then the gut of the meeting is there's a lot of information about 2024 and planning. And then at the end, as always, we'll have a Q&A session. So we started, this is, as we pointed out, our 57th meeting since we began this journey back in the days of COVID. We are still touching COVID. Wayne and I will partner up to provide you with a quick update. And by the way, Archdeacon David Seltzer is on vacation, so that's why David is not with us. So a couple of quick pieces. I'm not going to wade through these in detail, but I think that the message at the Canadian level, and these are Canada-wide charts, is really saying we have seen the expected surge of COVID as we exit the year. And, you can list all the factors out because we're moving indoors. There's more, so the kids are back in school, colleges, universities. We've got more social activities going on, whole lot of reasons, but there has been a new variant. There has been a surge. And as you can see, for most of these, we are higher at this point in the year than we have been at any other point in the year. And that doesn't matter whether you look at it in terms of forward-looking signals like wastewater, where they test wastewater for COVID, whether you're looking at the rate of testing, the positive rate, how many people are hospitalized in ICUs, all of those across the country are up. And from an Ontario perspective, we know we'd earlier heard from Dr. Kieran Moore that we are hopefully seeing a peak and that it's going to begin to tail in the new year. But at this point, we are at a high point. I'm just going to quickly talk to the 3 health units because we have, as always, be guided by what our health units are both saying and doing. So from starting in the west, Hastings, Prince Edward, as you can see, there continues to be this set of numbers: 23 people in hospital, 3 that are in ICUs, and as you can see below, the rates have peaked up, certainly the highest that they have been this year. The other thing that, of course, as we minister to those that are in what they consider high-risk settings, but in hospitals, in retirement homes, in long-term care facilities, etc., those rates, you'll see in each of these that the outbreaks, and those of you that are out there know that we continue to see outbreaks in those facilities. Moving east, KFLA, and again, they don't present the same data anymore, but I've picked some stuff to try and get it just a little bit different for each one. What you can see here is, again, that on the KFLA side, we are at the highest points, and they identify whether we're talking about COVID-19, the flu, influenza, or RSV, that we are in a high risk above the threshold that they consider. So again, lots of warning signs there. And then finally, jumping over to Leeds, Grenville, and Lanark, you can see the number of COVID cases has come down a little in the last little bit, remains at a fairly high level. The positivity going with that, hospitalization, thanks be to God, is down. What you see though down below for both Smith Falls and Brockville, which are the two testing points they seem to present, the wastewater testing is a leading indicator, right? That says we're seeing more and more in the wastewater. That means more and more people are contributing. And you see those rates continue to be up. So I think across the piece, what we see is that we are in a time of risk. We are not in the state that we were in 2 years ago, but we still retain in a sense where we do need to be cautious. So we'll jump over to the Venerable Wayne Barley, who's going to just summarize where we are at from a diocesan perspective.
Thank you, Alec, and good afternoon, friends. We've seen the data, and so I invite you to remember and practice what we are recommending in the life of our parishes so that we may safely and with people healthy gather for prayer and worship at Christmas and in the days and weeks to come. The gist of this is that, again, a reminder, it is the incumbent or priest in charge and church wardens who are responsible for reviewing your own COVID protocols and guidelines, doing so in accordance with provincial, health unit, and diocesan guidelines. Our guidelines continue to reside on the diocesan website under Clergy and Parish Resources. And so as we move through the winter season, praying that the COVID and influenza peak will soon pass, please be reminded to invite your folk to remain home if any are unwell or have symptoms. Regularly wash your hands and sanitize. All are encouraged to be vaccinated. And of course, facial masking is recommended, and people should feel comfortable doing so. Accept my prayer that you will be blessed this Christmas season, which I hope will be a closer to normal one for us compared to the last few years for differing reasons. And thanks be to God, we have the technology available to us to allow people to participate remote and online. Here is a chart about vaccination and eligibility and who should be seeking vaccination as quickly as possible if you or those in your care have not already done so. Alec, thank you for that. Friends, these charts will be available for your use later on the website. Back to you.
Thanks, Wayne. And so that kind of summarizes where we are. Of course, last year we did not have the restrictions on churches around COVID, but as you recall, we had a bit of a weather event that saw many churches cancel Christmas services. So hopefully this year, both the weather and the medical conditions will allow us to safely come together and celebrate the birth of the Savior. So with that covered, we'll move into some of the meat and talk about finance. So as you know, each quarter we produce a full set of financial reports together with a forecast, and the forecast again simply allows us to take the actuals for the year at that point, and in this case that would be the actuals up to the end of September, and then forecast out the last few months, adjusting the budget and for what we know, and that becomes what we call the view. And that is, if you will, our best case forecast of what the end of the year is going to look like. And so just here quickly, our income tracking to budget, expenses up and the deficit, again, because it's a relatively small number, at that point, up 16%. For the year, the income looking like it will be slightly down, less than 1%. Expenses coming in above budget, so we're tracking to a larger deficit. That really reflects that we have had a number of one-time things that are somewhat weren't forecast in the budget. And just a few of those things, the differences between the forecast end of year and the budgeted end of year. When we did our budgeting last year and had our budget approved, we did not budget on an Episcopal transition. And so there's costs associated across the piece with the electoral process, a special synod, with the relocation of the bishop, with getting the period where we ran in parallel with two bishops for a time, number of things that were one-time costs relating to every 10 or 12 years or so, we get ourselves a new bishop. And so that we don't plan on that being something we're going to work with in 2024. Hardware and software, as we've increased, as we've done some work in a couple of areas, including setting up new hardware. Legal costs continue to run slightly higher, as we've dealt with a couple of parish situations we've been assisting with. Interest, as we all know, interest rates are up, and so that has affected us as well. Amortization, which is a non-cash thing, but that's basically depreciation on booked assets, and we've made some adjustments there. The cost of carrying disused properties, and this is not the cost of ones we plan on selling, but ones that we don't expect to, of holding those properties and managing them has gone up. Clergy moving, we've had a number of clergy come into the diocese, and that has, we of course bear the costs of getting them to the diocese, and then moves within, we provide a grant for. And then we had one where the Justice and Peace Coordinator position has been empty for the year, and that was a saving. You'll see the numbers there in detail as we do comparisons through into the 2024 budget. Again, back to the bishop's comment to begin, but sometimes people go, well, where's God in all of this? Well, this is what we're going to work through here is the kingdom, serving the kingdom, building the kingdom, but through the lens of finance. And so while it is somewhat in that sense, we always remember that underneath what we are supporting and building is the kingdom. Just a reminder of what a budget is. It's a set of estimates around income and expenses on a defined period, and it's there to provide that as a guide for setting goals and for measuring outcomes and for planning. And so the budget serves many roles. There is another term, another definition of it that I rather find amusing at times. Budgeting is simply the science of distributing dissatisfaction on a uniform basis. Everybody should, at some point, nobody should be entirely happy. So just to set the stage a little bit, this looks back since 2010, where our income has looked, and that top black line is the total. The green line underneath is CMM, and the blue line under that is everything else, which includes interest and fees and expenses and all of that. So as you can see, our income had held fairly nicely, driven by CMM. We have increased the other income, but our CMM, as parish income has moved, has tilted downward somewhat over the last several years. Expenses, we took some major actions in the early part of the last decade, and we have seen things creep back upwards over the last 13 years. And that's a combination of factors. not the least of which is, of course, the effect of inflation. If you look, just to give sort of a framework, how the money gets spent, well, 51% of the diocesan expenditure, which is just over 1.7 million, goes to payroll, and that's paying for the staff in the synod office and the contractors that support that work. The next largest piece is infrastructure, and that's and that's the cost for building, for IT, for communications, for the work of our committees. About 7% goes as grants, and then the rest goes. The other 19 goes to general general synod and provincial synod. But basically, when you take those the general, provincial, and payroll, it accounts for about 70% of our total budget. And so when you map that, you can also see that back in 2010, we were in a deficit situation. We moved ourselves above that. Saw 2018 with a dip, but both 22 and 23, we have budgeted for and experienced deficit. Sorry, and the other point to that one is that the budget, as we talked, is slightly larger than budgeted in 2023. Again, we talked about those factors in the chart that was there on variances. Not going to dwell on this, but way back at the Synod of 2016, we had done the work as a diocese around our vision and strategy, and this continues to underpin everything that we tried to do. And the final point is just that we are on a journey. We're on a journey for this diocese began in 1862, and we continue forward from there, and we are building what those who follow us will take. So a few things as we look at the budget, and this affects both the way that the parish or the way that the things like the stipend grid and housing and the other things that roll through to parish guidelines, as well as the things that are built into the diocesan budget. One of the things is that certainly since we got quite comfortable with low inflation, low single digit inflation, 2%, 1%, and we were in that mode. In the last couple of years, we saw it climb, and of course, we have seen significant increases over the last couple of years as we've gone from that low single digits into higher single digits. We always use, and just for explanation, the Consumer Price Index, which is CPI. This comes from Stats Canada, and the nice thing is you can parsec this many ways. So we have always used Stats Can as the benchmark and the guideline. And in this case, we use the CPI excluding gasoline because we again account for mileage on a separate piece. So as you look at the budget, we come out of the year with almost $250,000 deficit is the forecast. So that is a bit of a hole to begin with. I liken it to trying to shoot 3-point shots in basketball from the foul line, and you're standing in a hole that's 6 foot deep. The first thing you have to do is get out of the hole. And as a very wise man that I once worked for said, when you want to get out of a hole, the first thing you do is stop digging. And so part of that work has been, how do we stop that digging? So as we work our way through, we know there's continued pressure on parish income. This year there is no general synod, but there is a provincial synod. We will have delegate costs associated with that. The markets continue to be affected by a wide range of things, including global events like what's going on in Gaza right now, what's going on in the Ukraine. As things hit in the United States, We know that there's an unsettling with an election coming. We know there's a number of things that affect the financial markets. We continue to work on cost reduction and efficiency, and we build on that which we've built over the last number of years in order to make ourselves more effective. We know that churches continue to change and the needs of churches continue to change. And then I mentioned inflation, which again summarized is that those numbers through. This is the chart directly from Synod that was the guidance that Synod provided earlier this year for 2024, holding CMM as a rate straight, looking for additional income, trying to restrain expenses to a balanced budget. And then the areas that were prioritized within that around reconciliation, national Indigenous ministries, new ministries, finance and admin and support, and creation care. And then finally, looking for innovative ways and alternate ways to support initiatives and churches, and to look at optional accounting service, bookkeeping services for churches. And so as I sort of built that into some of the directional changes that we talked to council about, it's around the financial expertise, because there's two elements. As churches continue to see that there tends to be more churches finding that there's no one to do the books, between people aging and between the complexity that starts to come. That's becoming a challenge, as is financial planning, more and more becoming an issue. Buildings, we've gone through a number of years where we have not had significant capital going on. The sorts of things you see with roofs and towers and pointing and foundations, not kind of doing small work, but doing large capital projects. Opportunities continue for new ministry. Partnerships as we build in the communities. HR and legal continues to go. We continue to see more and more parishes coming back with, we're having an issue with, and how do we deal with that? Or in some cases, we've already done something and we might be in trouble. So we continue to see those needs. Change management and how we work our way through towards the future. Stewardship, congregational development in terms of at the congregational level. The ministry allocation fund grows as we make sales of property. At the same time, our costs of holding properties has gone up, and we have more properties in the diocesan portfolio now as churches are coming to the difficult choice of some of the churches that have been out there that parishes have held on to and paid to have them maintained, paid for insurance, paid for utilities, even though the church is not active anymore. And now we're seeing churches realizing this is a significant financial load, and they're being passed back to the diocese, often in rural situations with cemeteries. And that creates a unique set of problems because municipalities are not inclined to take, they pretty much have to eventually take a cemetery, but they really don't want any part of an old church building or an old hall that goes with it. And so we would then bear the cost of dealing with that before the municipality would take it. If you've got 10 of those and it costs 50 to 75,000 just to tear a basic business down or basic building down, you're looking at $500,000 to $750,000. And so you can sort of see the scale of what we're trying to work through. The other thing that we're looking at is and our diocese is helping lead the way, where we're collaborating with other dioceses. And in this case, we are collaborating with another diocese to consider sharing payroll services and to consider sharing accounting systems with the longer term goal of sharing the accounting function across dioceses, which is another way that, again, corporations save money by centralizing services. So things that were built into the budget that was approved, the Episcopal transition was complete, which is a nice way of saying we're not budgeting money in 2024 for that. We made, after again a difficult set of discussion and debate, but the decision was made to reduce the general synod proportional gift, which we currently pay at 20%, by down to 10%. And that was a matter which was not an easy choice to make. It also reflects, though, that we intend to support Indigenous ministry directly. That we intend to, rather than passing that through our general synod proportional gift, that we are going to work at that directly. There will be no paid justice and peace coordinator in 2024. There was one in the budget in 23, but it was not staffed. There's no diocesan synod planned in 24. There is a provincial synod, which is in Sault Ste. Marie in September. We will have our 4 lay delegates, 4 clerical delegates, bishop, and a youth delegate who will attend that on behalf of this diocese. And there is no general synod planned in 2024. Those are all cost comments. The bishop has indicated that he intends to work on a regular basis in a group session with his clergy. So we put clergy days, which we have had in the past, back in, and a number of those are now planned and budgeted for. We talked about disused properties. We talked about continuing to try and push cost reductions. We do, of course, we had some wonderful, happy news where Laura has now gone on parental leave. And we had, of course, the birth of Laura and Stu's new daughter, and we rejoice for that. We also will work our way through 2024 without Laura, and I'm also pleased to announce that we're sad that while we won't have Laura working with us, we do have a new person filling in Laura's position, and that's Madison Murphy. And Madison, I believe, is on the call, and she's available working in the similar functions around payroll and expenses and those pieces, DAGs. And finally, we did still leave a slight deficit in the budget. And we have committed that we are going to work to manage that and report to council. And that managing that, I mean, it's quite simple. If you want to lose weight, you need to take fewer calories in and burn more. So slow down eating or eat better and exercise more. Well, budget's not much different. If you want to reduce the deficit, bring more in, spend less. And so we are very focused, and our bishop has a very strong focus on how we're going to drive additional stewardship for the diocese. So we have a number of things we're working through there, and that'll be reported on quarterly to council. So as I mentioned, you can see the numbers as they sort of go year to year to year. And as you can see, that the deficit has come down drastically. We've left that 50K there because we don't have a specific plan around dealing with that, but the intention is to. And this just takes the same numbers out one level farther. This is using better, worse. So if it's income, better is higher. If it's expense, worse is higher. So that's the brackets and that here. But what you see is that the 189,000 of expense reduction, which is a big chunk of that being driven by the general synod reduction. And of course, the bishop's office is cheaper because we only have one bishop this year, and we don't have the transition costs. This is just how it breaks out by those areas. So just a graphical version of what you just saw that that says here's where they are proportionally. So from a 2024 bridges directly to that, we use the same levels for stipend increases that we use that come out in the grid are also the levels that are produced are used for the Synod staff. So the two all link, and of course, as we do housing allowance and based upon inflation and car allowance, or sorry, mileage allowance, not a car allowance, those are all pieces. That was all contained in the package which came out on the 12th of December. That's just a short table of contents that was in it that covers the variety of areas. I'm going to pick a few of these now to talk to in a little bit more detail. So on the grid side, as you know, we use the grid in terms of how our clergy are handled from a stipend point of view. And when a priest comes in the diocese, either transferring in or as a new ordinand, they are placed on the grid, and the grid has the horizontal axis of years of experience in ministry and equivalent years before ordination, and then low, medium, high, top on the vertical axis. And each year you move to the right on the grid as you gain more experience. And each year is roughly 2.5 to 3.5% increase in addition to whatever the inflation factor is. For the clergy, they go up to 30 years. For the salaries for non-clergy diocesan staff, there's a mouthful, we cap it at 12 years. 30 years, by the way, some point we do have a number of clergy that have capped at 30 years. Some dioceses, for example, are 15. There's one diocese in the province that is 10 years they cap it at. Our practice and always has been ours works out to 30. The housing allowance is based upon the cost of rented accommodation and utilities. What you find, and I usually check with the other dioceses, they all sit between 3% and 4.5% in terms of the overall grid change. I also always point out to council that wardens continue to express concern just on the increasing costs that they experience. So the grid's moved 3.3%. So basically every box on that grid moved up by 3.3%. And that reflects the Ontario, the StatsCan Consumer Price Index for Ontario with housing removed. And housing's removed from that because we handle housing separately. The housing allowance is at 5.7, which is again what the Ontario housing CPI moved by. And so that sees the baseline housing move from 28,378 to 29,995. It cannot be less than that without the bishop's permission. We did talk about the grid. That's of course what you've all seen it in the package, but that reflects again the vertical axis of minimum, mid, high, and top, and reflects years since ordination across the piece. And so all of that, of course, has to come. You can make that decision locally, and your priest can live with great joy on what their increase looks like for the year. But in order for that to actually get executed into the payroll system, it takes a bunch of work for that to happen. So I'm going to ask Joyce Williams, who handles all of our payroll, to talk to you for a few minutes about the payroll change process and tools.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Alex. I always like to joke that I am everyone's favorite person on the 15th and the 30th of the month. So, you know, if people are upset with me at other times, it always comes back to those 2 days. So first of all, the first pay for 2024 is on January 15th, which is a Monday. And we are asking if you can have the forms sent back to us by January the 5th. We did send all the payroll update forms to the treasurers today. And if we can get it back by the 5th, there's a lot of work that goes into updating not only the increases with the stipend and salary, but also all of the government and the pension and benefits all do need to be changed. If we get those back later, it's more difficult to do the adjustments, and it just helps us out a lot. I did indicate in the letter that the TD1 forms, which are the tax forms from the government, the CRA has not yet updated them to the 2024 numbers yet. I checked just before the meeting. So I have provided, instead of the actual forms, we have provided the link to the forms. So if anyone needs those, I would hope that they are updated within the next couple days, at least by year end. So all of those come into effect, the changes in the benefits and any other deductions, as we mentioned, on the 1st of January. The statement of stipend and salary has not changed. It looks very familiar. We need the warden signatures and the employees and the pre-signatures there. And then if you do wish to be paid just once a month, we do ask you to send the election form in, indicating that. Otherwise, you'll get paid twice a month on the 15th and 30th. And I believe that should cover it. So back over to Alex.
Thanks, Joyce. Just and for clarity, unless you're changing your election, you don't need to fill a form out. It's only if you wish to change. If you're paid by twice a month and you want to only be once, then you need to fill that form out. Similarly, who needs to fill the TD1 out, Joyce?
The TD1 forms only need to be returned to us if, number one, there is a new employee. We always need those TD forms so we know the amount of federal tax that is actually deducted. The only other situation is if your situation changes and there's new numbers you need to provide to us, or if you wish to have additional income tax taken off for the year. And just to let you know, you can fill out those forms at any point during the year. If something should change in your life or you decide you want an additional $50 taken off for income tax, feel free to mail those at any point.
Thanks, Joyce. So one of the other areas that changed, and we've talked about this for a number of years, our mileage rate, we've had a lot of debate on for as long as I've been around, and we have used a variety of ways to try and grid that. The CRA basically at the end of the day determines what the maximum is. And that's because they prescribe something called the reasonable rate. So for example, what they're trying to avoid is saying, well, the Bishop of Ontario is a wonderful man and he does a fabulous job. And so we're going to pay him $10 a kilometer for every kilometer that he travels. And apart from him thinking he won the lottery, the Revenue Canada would look at that and say, wait a minute, that's not a reimbursement for an expense. That's actually providing a benefit, providing income. And that is taxable. And so the CRA is in the last year or two become more prescriptive about it. We know that it's one of the car related things, is one of the things that triggers audits. And for any of our clergy that have been around a number of years, you would have been audited, and that's one of the pieces area they would have dug into. They're making sure that what you're being paid back is a reimbursement for expense, not additional income. So their reasonable rate, if you pay more than that, the whole thing becomes a taxable benefit under their new rules. So that's not just the delta. If you paid an extra 10 cents, it's not just the 10 cents that taxable. They now make the whole thing taxable. So what we're doing is we were previously, and we have been for many years, at 61 cents for the first 18,000 kilometers and 40 cents thereafter a kilometer. What we're changing to this year and what council's approved is moving to 68 cents, which is the CRA rate, and that is only for the first 5,000 kilometers. After the first 5,000, it becomes 62 cents. And that is what the CRA prescribes as the rates. Going forward, we will stick with the CRA rates and move each year on that basis. Volunteers and supply clergy will get the 62 cent rate per kilometer. But the big adjustment for most of the city-based clergy, they would never hit 18,000 kilometers. For some of our rural-based clergy, you can get obviously higher amounts of mileage. Other areas that affect cost planning. So in its previous one of the previous budgets, the government had announced that they were enhancing the Canada Pension Plan, and one of the ways that they're doing that is that they raise the rates, and for this year the base rate goes up 5.7%. But they've also created what is called CPP2. And the intention of this, of course, is that down the road, the benefits will be enhanced of Canada Pension Plan. But basically, they're adding between 68,500 and 73,200. If you're anything in between those will be assessed an additional 4%. So as Joyce will handle all that in the payroll pieces, but what it does is it essentially takes the maximum contribution for churches as the employer, in this case, up to $4,055 a year. Most of our clergy, because when you consider this is stipend and housing. So most of our clergy will be over, well, in fact, all of our clergy full-time will be over that 68.5 threshold. So you will see a higher, there'll be a 4% on that. There's a couple of $100 change there, plus the increase in the base rate. On the EI side, employment insurance, the rates went up by 1.8%. So that takes for the employee, it's $1.66 per $100. And for the employer, it's $2.32. It's 1.4 times the employee's rate. From the benefits side, and these are managed for us through the National Pension Office plan, the extended health care is going up 6%. And again, that depends on whether it's family single or family. The dental has gone up 10%. And again, that has the 3 levels in it. Long-term disability, there's been no change. That's an internally managed program. And I will point out, by the way, that our bishop sits as chair on the pension board, so and on the pension trust. So we do have a different ear to things. Life insurance benefit, the only one that went up there is one of the optionals, and that's the death benefit, which is actually paid by the clergy or the employee. That went up 4%. The general synod pension plan, the rates have not gone up. It's still 12.5% of housing and stipend for the parish, 5% for the employee or the cleric. Of course, as the stipend and housing goes up, the net dollars go up because the percentage base. Con Ed, which has been $900 since a few years ago when it was increased, remains at $900 a year. The other area that everybody always wants to talk about, and I think after the difficult 2023, there's even a higher level of focus, is around insurance. We carry a broad package that covers our property, our liability, and crime. One of the things that's important is that we have on our abuse, what's called PSA, our physical and sexual abuse, that our coverage is based on an occurrence basis. The other option is claims made. And so in our case, by the way, I've been in the office now over 8 years, and all of the suits, and we deal with a fair number of them, all of the suits have all been for occurrences before the year 2000. We are dealing with historic matters. And why that's important that I mention it is that our coverage is based on occurrence. So the insurer from 1980, that insurer is still on the hook for a claim made in 2024 because we're on an occurrence based. If the insurance companies who are pushing to get the move to a claims made basis, you would only be able to collect on claims that are made this year. And so you can see the tail would be drastically reduced. If we were on a claims made basis, the claim that I'm dealing with that is around 1980, we would have no insurance for. And so it's important to keep that in context in terms of how it works. Coverage, property, people ask me, well, we don't have a boiler. Why are we getting charged? Well, it's boiler and machinery, and that covers everything from your furnace, if you don't have a boiler, your hot water tank, your sump pump, any of that kind of equipment, fans. If you have some of the old churches have ceramic heaters in them, that's what's covered under there. It's called boiler and machinery. General liability, someone falls on your steps of your church, slips, getting out of a pew and slips on the floor and falls. There's a ton, miscellaneous liability, all the things that can happen that you're covered. We've talked about abuse, whether it's physical or sexual, crime, and that can be not just someone stole your collection. That can also be cyber crime. It can be, there's a host of areas of losses. We usually have a few break-ins a year, and that's covered there. Director and officers liability, everyone that's on this call that is a warden or a treasurer or a cleric is considered a director or an officer. And that makes you personally liable for what happens in your church. And that's a simple reality of law. What the insurance covers with D&O, as it's called, is to protect if there are claims. And when people sue, they sue everywhere. They sue the church, they sue the diocese, they'll sue the wardens, they'll sue whoever may have been responsible for what happened. They'll sue anywhere and everywhere. That's how the legal system works. There's coverage. I think everybody knows Aon is our broker, large company that is multinational, headquartered out of the UK, and we are served in this diocese from their Ottawa office. Ecclesiastical, who we love to hate and hate to love, but Ecclesiastical is a British owned that began around churches. For the Church of England, it continues to be owned by the All Churches Trust, which is one of the largest charities in the UK. They came into Canada about 50 years ago, and they specialize in religious institutions, universities, colleges, etc. And they are our umbrella provided. So just a couple of quick things around as we get to the rates. We live, as we talked, a little bit of uncertainty in the world, inflation, both the cost of things now and the cost of settlements. So, for example, we have seen the settlements at mediation and in court for abuse cases skyrocket in the last 2 or 3 years. Like they have literally doubled, tripled, quadrupled. And so there's inflation of that nature as well. Climate risk, and we know how we're concerned about, but the shifts in weather, whether that's causing dryness and that ends up with fires as a piece, whether that is increased rain, there's the heat. There's a whole risk of things around climate change and the impacts. Remember that in the global market, the hurricanes, when you hear about a hurricane in Florida, you should be going, oh, we pray for them. You also pray for the insurance companies, because when they have to go and pay out tens of billions of dollars, that affects their global business. And then we see cyber going up dramatically, the risks of cyber. And that is not just someone hacking into your bank account or doing a transaction, but the cost of someone stealing identity and then suing the organization that it was stolen from. So all of those things are part of what fits under cyber, and that is exploding. The difficult reality is there's not a ton of organizations that will insure faith-based organizations. Part of that is around the perception. Part of that is around the uniqueness and the history. Sadly, there is a large track record in many places of abuse that's occurred within church organizations. And that has a very long tail from the insurance industry. We talked about the push to claims made from occurrence. We talk about property. I mean, again, most of our churches are older buildings and of a type of construction that isn't necessarily affordable to replace and not always the best in terms of protecting. We have higher vacancy rate in terms of there's a lot of the week that our church building may not be used. There's limited protection in many places. Not very many of our churches have fire alarms and sprinkler systems. If you think in your rural churches, how far is it to a fire department? How long would it take the volunteer department to respond? And so those are issues. In the broader context, they struggle up north because of the cost of getting materials to rebuild and labor to rebuild. And then finally, we are, when things happen, it's a simple reality that when additional residential school graves are discovered, there will often be an increase in vandalism and arson around some churches somewhere in the country. And again, you don't know where that's going to be, you don't know why, but we do see those factors, and that adds to the vulnerability and the risk. So in the last couple of days, I was pretty close based on my conversation with our Aon people, but as of today or yesterday, I got a little more guidance more specifically. So here's what we can expect in the general case, that there'll be a 5% inflation on replacement costs. So the replacement cost, if it was a dollar this year, it's $1.05 next year. We expect to see the property premium rates increase by 10%. And that's again based upon the factors we've talked about, the loss coverage, and the difficulty they're having offloading or reinsuring some of these pieces. So to try and just to help understand that a bit, the way that your property premium is calculated is by taking the value, which on active churches is replacement cost. And that, by the way, averages, and I know there's wide variations, but just if you do a simple arithmetic average, our average church is worth $1.5 million. Now there's some that are worth that. There are some that are worth many times that. There are some that are worth a third of that. You then take that and multiply it by the premium rate. The premium rate depends somewhat. There are different rates for different areas and locations, but I pulled 0.22 as a typical kind of average. So it's 22 cents per $100 of. It's a lot bigger. It's a longer number. It's 4 or 5 decimal places. But for just to talk about it, it averages around 22 cents per $100 of replacement cost. And then you add, if there's other factors, if your building is in a location that is listed as a flood or earthquake zone, and everybody goes earthquakes, this is Ontario. However, we do get earthquakes, and they use the maps and the survey, but that can add another couple of pennies per $100 of replacement cost. So when you add that together, you take the insured value times the premium rate plus the add-on, you'll get to the total property premium. Again, these vary all over the place. The average, just the arithmetic average, was $3,400 property last year. So that's the guidance I can give you in terms of what we can expect. On the liability side, there's no increase in the general and PSA or physical sexual abuse liability premiums. The directors and officers will go up 5%, but as you can see, that's 5% on $180. That's $9. So I think that's manageable. But the standard, every church, whether it's our largest or our smallest, regardless of where it is, your liability premium in 2023 was roughly $1,600. They're all the same. That covers cyber, crime, and umbrella. That covers your general liability. As you can see, the biggest single one is the physical and sexual abuse, and then directors and operators. So the first three are not changing. The bottom one is. So that's 1,600 roughly will become roughly 1,609 in 2024. So hopefully very early in January, and we were very, apart from being unhappy with the increases in 2023, it took a long time for them. As you recall, we didn't get our billing packages till months later than we normally would. There was a lot of dissatisfaction expressed. I like to think I just channel some of your dissatisfaction when I deal with them. So they are working hard to get that done. I'm expecting in January to get the billing pack, which has the spreadsheet that lets us break it down, that takes it church by church, and the documents that go with that, the summary of your coverages and the invoice and all those pieces that you get in your package each year. I'm expecting all that to arrive hopefully by the end of January. We will then package it, distribute it, and bill it out. And our target is to get that done in February. From a budgeting point of view, my recommendation is there's those two charts, which will of course be up on the website. They're similar to what's in the package. And then what in this recording, that's what I would recommend you budget for. We continue to look for alternatives. I've been involved in a task force at the provincial level. I'm leading it. I've had several discussions with the issue for us is to provide the same broad coverage that we have today, and to do so at a better cost, to make it worth the massive amount of work to make the change. So other topics, CMM. So we've had a number of challenges this year. Those who, someone once angrily said that the diocese, there's corruption. Well, I can tell you that we have been dealing with corruption. Not the kind of corruption you're thinking of. I'm talking about the kind that happens in Excel files when you can no longer open a massive Excel document that now simply has gone corrupt on you. That caused us a tremendous amount of issue. We've had a number of very one-time strange things happen. So and some other things that we've had to deal with. So you will in December get the final 2023 with the adjustment because you've been paying based on 2022 rate, there'll be the adjustment for whatever up or down there is in the December payment. 2024 will be 20%. What we've got is a tool that, and I've got several people that are anxiously looking to try it, and we've had a couple of issues with the tool. I think we're through those, but doing simplification also requires, it isn't just making the tool itself simpler. You have to make some of the practice and the way you handle things behind it. And that's part of what's taken a little longer, is to get simplification to make it easier for you to work that through. And again, encouraging parishes to do their own so-called green sheet. A few other things just as we hit the back end. T3010s, that is the CRA's required reporting if you have a charitable number. It is due within 6 months of your financial year. Every church in our diocese is on a calendar year. So that means that by the end of June, you have to have your T3010 in. I can tell you that years ago, the CRA would send you letters and bug you and really want all that taken care of. They now take a very different approach. And as part of the challenges from some charities that have gone askew, if you don't get, basically at this point, if you have not filed your 2022 T3010, you will have gotten a letter that threatens and means it. And come January, they will then basically remove your charitable status. They will take your number and disqualify it, and it will take you about a year to get it back. And just think about the challenges of stewardship in our churches. But if you're not able to provide, what that means is if you lose your charity number, you can't give out a tax receipt. And that will definitely, for most people, while they are giving for the kingdom, of course, the work of the church, but they're also factoring in the fact that there is a tax advantage. So again, I ask every year, and we've got a couple right now that are working through a very difficult situations. It is the parish's responsibility to file the T3010. We can consult if you've got questions, but it is your responsibility. The number belongs to the church, not to the diocese. Every church has a different charitable number, or every parish, depending on how you were structured. And it is the warden's responsibility, because only the wardens can sign for it. So that is an important piece. The bereavement authority, the annual license reports for cemeteries, ALR1, which is activity, ALR2, which is finance, are due the end of March. And I've got a phone call. I had a call with the CEO of the BAO last week, and they are now very serious about any cemetery that hasn't filed them. Parish information returns. We talked in a previous call this year about the new online tool for that. Mark and Wendy will be sending that out, but the data for parish returns, you're canonically responsible. The cleric is responsible, although they can delegate it, but the cleric is responsible for making sure it gets done. That can be done now. Instead of by a spreadsheet, it'll be done by an online tool. You're responsible to do so within a month of your vestry meeting. That's important because knowing who your delegates are, knowing who your wardens are, who get invited to these calls, your treasurers, your et cetera, et cetera. So those are very important pieces. And Mark and Wendy will be sending them out in the new year, and they'll be even easier to complete. And then finally, his vestry reports are due also within a month. That's both from a financial side and for the records around each church. Our next meeting is next year, right? We do not have another meeting this year, ladies and gentlemen. Third Thursday of each month is our normal routine. That would make it the 18th of January, 2024. And with that, we have the bishop and Archdeacon Wayne and myself online. We've also got most of the staff here as well. Now, as I mentioned, Laura is now on leave, but so we had to find someone who could do as fine a job as Laura at moderating the chat of the session. And you know, I can honestly say we found ourselves a star replacement. And so Mark Hauser will be moderating the chat. So you can ask questions either by coming off mute. I would ask you stay on mute. And you can come off mute, raise your hand. I already see one hand up. If you can raise your hand with that lovely little hands icon up at the top of your screen, and we'll work through those. For anybody that's on the audio bridge, you can come off mute as well. I'll ask for people on that front, and we will open up. So let me just get my screen up here. Come on. So Trish, your number one hand.
Thanks, Alex. So my understanding from what I've heard from the treasurers and wardens, we have not got our CMM assessments returned. So any adjustments are going to come in the new fiscal year. Can we get a letter?
They'll be coming they'll come in your December. 2023 will balance at the end of the year.
That's not going to give us enough time. I can't see how that is going to give our treasurers enough time if we haven't received the adjustments. So what day is that going to come out, and what day do you expect us to get you? Say it's a $300 difference that we owe or is owed to us. How is that going to work?
So
I thought it was in November, so we'd have time to respond. Coming at the end of December isn't going to help.
Well, we're at the end of December, so you will get that in the piece, and you will have the normal. So what will happen is very shortly you'll get an email that says your 11 payments were this, your balance is this, and that'll then be in your, as always, will then be in the amount charged to you in December, which is then due in January. And for those that have a credit, that credit will carry across. And for those that don't have a that have something owing, then that's in the account.
Okay, but I just want to clarify that this isn't an always thing. We have been running off CMM estimates all year. Because the tool wasn't available. So this isn't a thing we do every year. There might be an adjustment because something wasn't paid or something. But I'm saying it kind of compromises us for finishing our books for the end of the year. My question is, can we get a letter from the diocese saying that because of the CMM estimate, maybe there's some questions about the end of the calendar fiscal year, just so we can present that to our vestry boards, to our financial reviewers, hopefully not to CRA, explaining that we were running on a CMM estimate all year. So if we didn't get it enough time to respond and sort of pay the accurate amount of CMM, that we have the rationalization of why that was delayed. It wasn't something internal to our treasurer.
So no, and it's not internal to your treasurer, but this is no different in many ways than your hydro bill, because you'll go at the end of the year and you'll have a bill that says this is how much you owe. Now your treasurers will have set either they're accruing or they're not. But when you do your books for the end of the year, you'll have an email that says this is the amount that was what I indicated. This is how much you've paid year to date. This is how much the total is. This is what your year end is. And you'll have the, I don't understand what the challenge is, because you'll have that document when you go to do your year end statements.
We'll agree to disagree. The challenge is we've been doing CMM estimates and have no confidence in what our actual CMM rate should have been for the past year. I know we're close, but it does make a difference.
And again, when you close your books for the year, you'll have the number. I'm not sure what your issue is.
I hope we have the number. I will trust we will have the number, but that number was promised in November previously and in the summer. That's what my issue is.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're heard. You were heard. Thank you. Next one up is George Vale.
Hi, Alex. Where there you said wardens were concerned about the cost, rising costs. Yeah, I definitely am for our church. That am I correct, or did I miss something that you could expect our insurance to go up by 10% in 2024?
So your property, again, it's a mixture, because your total insurance is a mixture of property, and that's where the 10 and the 5 will be, that and liability, which is not going up much at all.
Okay.
Okay.
But it's going to vary. It varies depending on your property. If you've got an expensive property, then the numbers will be up on a higher percentage basis than if you had a lower cost. But yep, there is. I would say you're looking net at probably 10 to 12% typically.
Oh yeah, because it just we just went up 40% on us back in the fall.
Again, and that's driven by a number of factors. Yep, some of that was driven by rate increases, and some of that was driven by changes in replacement cost. Yep.
Our two biggest costs for us is insurance and heating. That's our two biggest costs.
Yep.
Is there any way? You were talking about like some buildings worth a little, some and a lot. Is there any way we could get just to know what our building would be worth?
Yep, I have. We've got our statement of value pieces we're working through. Basically, in most cases, if you take what you've got on last year's document, and it listed one of those insurance document listed your replacement costs. If you increase those, if you increase those by 10%, that's roughly where you're going to be.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah, that's all I have for right now. Thanks.
But understand, George, insurance is a concern for everyone. The cost of and the wide number of things, it's a difficult one because we have precious few options. We are looking at alternative ways of trying doing it, but we still face that is an increasing cost, and I suspect for the next number of years, it ain't going down.
Okay, then you answered the next question I was thinking of asking. Yeah, because you said you were looking into other avenues we could maybe use. Yep. Okay, good. Yep. Thank you very much.
Robert Whitehouse has got a hand up.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm treasurer of St. Paul's Anglican Church in Westport. And an issue with our parish is that we have two churches within the parish, St. Mary's in Newborough and St. Paul's in Westport. But we only have one CRA registration number. And over the years, this has created a significant problem because, first of all, for the T3010 form, we have to somehow combine the returns of both churches. And the other problem is that it puts the combined return over the $100,000 mark, which means a Schedule 6 return rather than just filling out Section D. And over the years, the diocese helped us with this by filing the return for us because of the general complexity, which the treasurers could not handle. And of course, now we've run into the problem that returns weren't filed because the diocese stopped helping us with this, and we didn't know about it. But my basic question is there a way to have a registration for each church? Because this is the way it should have always been anyway. I know from coming from Quebec, where I was treasurer of an Anglican church there, every single church, regardless of the parish, had its own registration and avoided this kind of problem. So is there a mechanism whereby we can have separate registrations for our two churches and get over the significant problems we have?
Yep, and again, in the old system, so to speak, when there was multi-point parishes like this, there was often a central treasurer, and in fact, there was up until the last few years in Lakes and Locks. And so the simple answer to that is that one of the churches could go and take out, apply for, and it would take a little bit of time, but you can do the paperwork and apply for a new charity number for that church. So just for illustrative purposes, you could on the St. Paul's side say we're going to go and get our own charity number, and then St. Mary's could keep the old one, for example. That's there is indeed an option to do that. It's essentially applying separately and setting up a new number.
So I presume then there is a government form for this that I can look for.
Oh, there is indeed a form. If the CRA, what they call Charity Directorate, the forms are available there. And again, in the past, there was help. John Secker used to complete some parish T3010s for a number of reasons. Workload, but also because the CRA will not, at no point could we sign a T3010 for a church. And the CRAs become very specific about who can actually speak. So if I called and wanted to talk to the CRA about your T3010, they wouldn't talk to me. They will only speak to the names that are listed on there's a form that lists the officers. They will, and so that's, again, it's a parish responsibility. There was a time when we helped with that. The new form we're trying to do is going to try helping you with the data to be able to fill it out, but filling it out is a parish responsibility. And when you sign it, that's you as a warden certifying the information.
Okay, well, this is extremely important that all the churches really understand this. Otherwise, they will get a letter just like this from CRA.
Yep, agree. And that's why I'm highlighting it, Robert. That's part of why I'm highlighting to make sure.
Warn other churches not to get in this situation. We now have had to hire an accountant who's frantically working to help us with getting our filing in for 2022.
Yep.
Fortunately, we have our paperwork in order within a reasonable level, But even so, because we're combining the returns of two churches, it's complex even for a professional accountant. But we're getting through it, fortunately, but it's not easy.
And we have had, this diocese and other dioceses have had churches lose their charitable number. That does happen. The CRA is
Okay.
not very forgiving.
No,
I
they,
s-
right.
They're not.
Apparently that is true. Right.
I
Okay.
see Sharon Stein. I see you've got your hand up. You got to come off mute, Sharon.
How's that? That's better. Thank you, Alex. There was a figure for the value of St. John's Anglican Church in Prescott. I'm wondering, is that something George may have missed that meeting, although he misses very few. If anybody misses meetings, it's usually me for other commitments. However, is that something I should just let George know, the figure that I heard, I guess? Is that right, George?
Yeah, or it's also on the documents that we sent you with your invoice.
Okay.
Includes, you'll see, it's referred to as RC, which is replacement cost.
Right. I haven't seen that
I
document.
missed the last meeting.
Yeah.
So, and I probably didn't my apology. I probably just didn't look at the invoice.
Right. I haven't seen that paper, which I certainly could. I'm sure I could see it if I asked, but I'll give you a call after the meeting, George.
Okay, thank you.
And
Okay.
George, if you can't find the documents, I can help you there.
Right.
Okay, thank you. I have one more question if nobody else is ahead of me.
Well, actually, Wayne Thornhill's next. We're down in your end neck of the woods. I'll get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
Get in line, George.
Come on, boys, behave.
Just to follow up on some of that, just to clarify my own brain, how is the value of each of our individual churches determined? Who does that and how and when?
So that's done. Good question. It's done by ecclesiastical. In the old days, it was done by sending somebody out who did appraise, that's what they did. Typically, they will often do it with an online tool because they look at, what's the construction, how old is it, what is the square footage, is there air, So they have a set of standards they use for that. And then where there's uniqueness, they will still send somebody out. And what they have done is generally, and I can speak from experience, is that if you look at the churches that saw increases in their appraised value of the replacement cost beyond just the inflation last year, those are churches that have had some level of activity with the insurer in the last year. Because once they're looking at a claim because of a roof or a theft or whatever else, they then start looking at the building and saying, wait a minute, this is undervalued. You can also, and we have a couple of churches that look at their value and say, the church or the hall is undervalued. And so you can then request, or let's say we had a church that redid their kitchen, and that would have a material and what the replacement costs would be, material impact. So you can ask for a reappraisal.
That would be like asking for a rate hike.
It pretty much is, yes. It has benefits and it has challenges.
Yeah. Okay.
The Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away. Thanks, Wayne. Ted Davey.
Thank you, Alex. You're probably aware of the significant tower restoration problem we have at St. Mark's Berryfield.
I am.
And so I'm wondering how we go about getting some money back from our insurance policy to help us cover the significant costs that are going to be involved in this.
Well, I'm not clear on the rationale to the insurer. I'm certainly happy to support going after that. We can talk about individual specifics, but in general, the insurer would need to understand what their business case is for investing in the building. Presumably that it's going to lower the risk or lower the cost for them if something happens. But in general, they're not participating in those types of things. They would participate in saying you can't use that building anymore because the tower is dangerous. But we can certainly have that discussion, Ted, but I'm not aware of ecclesiastical engaging on that side.
it seems we're paying for a lot of money for some of those physical things for the church. And yet we never seem to get anything back unless it burns up. I'm wondering, I'd be prepared to do the paperwork to challenge this sort of thing.
Well,
because
I'm
of the
prepared.
high expense.
I can say we've got 2 churches right now that have major capital going on. And certainly St. Mark's is one. I'm quite happy to go back to Aon and ask, is there an avenue here? Is there a potential we could come at that and see? And then I have senior executive at Ecclesiastical I have access to. So I'm more than happy to go back and try and push that.
Thank you very much.
George, now we're back to you.
Thanks, Alex. In the things you were showing on about the insurance, there was one there you said about boilers and machinery. Well, we have a boiler that's now. How does that work? Like, we have a boiler that's going to have to be replaced next year. Definitely is going to have to. I was told this year that this is the last year for it. How is there any way you can put that cost through insurance, or does it have to be a what is
yeah, no, and again, they're not, there's certain categories of plumbing and roof, or there may be a 1 year bit of a small credit, but in general, the insurer's perspective is if your boiler blows up, they would then cover the damage that was done as the result of the explosion, but they would not pay for a new boiler.
Okay, no,
the maintenance. Yeah, they separate maintenance from, and we've had churches that have filed roof claims.
Yeah,
they have paid for a chunk of the roof where it was well maintained. There was another chunk of the roof that was due to be replaced, and they said, "Sorry, we'll cover the damage, but not the roof," because it was due to be replaced anyway.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if I have the knowledge to know how to blow this boiler up or not.
Well, and I la.
Yeah.
Can't hear it.
Okay.
Can't hear it.
Thanks, Alex.
Mark, do we have any questions in the chat? Don't blow this.
We don't, Alex. I put out a message saying I am not accepting any chat messages today. No, please send in your chat messages, but nothing yet.
Got any questions? Anybody on the audio bridge? Well, then let's go last call all the way around. Okay, then Bishop, can we turn back to you to close the meeting?
Let us pray. We thank you, Lord, for all the blessings of this life, for our ministry, and for your Spirit which abides with us daily. Help us to be open to your loving Spirit as we celebrate Christmas. Give us peace in our homes, peace in our hearts, and most assuredly, Lord, peace in the world. This we pray through Christ our Lord. Amen. God bless you all. Thank you.
Merry Christmas, everyone. This is one environment where there can be no question that it is more than acceptable to say Merry Christmas. And
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas from George and Barb Bale from St. John's Anglican Church in Prescott. And I hope you all health, happiness, laughter, and a good time in 2024.
Thanks, George. Merry Christmas.
Take care.
thanks, everyone.